but we're only vulnerable if there are exposures, or we're only exposed if there are vulnerabilities. And there are a number of different categories of vulnerabilities. We tend to think of them largely in terms of system flaws, meaning there's a software bug. Okay, well, that means we have to patch, or there's a misconfiguration. Somebody didn't turn on security. But there are other things. You can have a password, but maybe the password is weak, or maybe you didn't set the password, even though there's a password function installed. Or maybe the human is just gullible and clicked on a link that they shouldn't and gave access to something. Maybe there's a lack of oversight. Exposures happen in a number of ways. And as you can see through these, many of them boil down to what people do or what people do wrong. But when you take all of this, you take a step back and you think, what constitutes risk and what is the impact? Well, the impact has two aspects to it. One is generally financial. We all tend to think about this as an above the line impact. That when it comes down to it, if you are breached, there are a number of ways that's going to cost you. There could be fines. There's the cost of containing the incident, responding to it, maybe having to buy new devices that may have been destroyed, impact to your brand, loss of jobs. Now, this figure that I'm showing here is something put together by Frost and Sullivan in a study commissioned by Microsoft. And they looked at a particular year. What is the total cost of cybersecurity, the economic impact of cybersecurity in Singapore for that particular year? And they estimated it as $17.7 billion. That was just 1 year. So we know that the impact we see from cybersecurity is a huge financial implication. But there's a secondary impact that's important to think about. And the reason I mention is because it really needs to drive how we think about cybersecurity and its role in the world today. Cybersecurity also hinders the innovation and digitization of everything that we're doing out there. Cisco did a study a number of years ago where we talked to organizations that were transitioning, taking a lot of their more manual processes, automating them, going from applications and systems that were hosted inside their network to putting them on the cloud, coming up with apps that interacted with other companies' websites, everything that we describe as digitization. And we asked them, what role does cybersecurity play? 71% said that threats hinder innovation in my organization. And there are a number of reasons for that. Like, we can't get sign off to do this project because the security team said that we haven't addressed cybersecurity risk properly. There might be personal data in there and we haven't locked it down, thought about how we would lock it down. But even worse, in about 40% of the cases, organizations said, we had a mission critical project going on, but we had to stop it or we had to pause it because we couldn't address the cybersecurity concerns. And so this secondary impact has to do with the fact that it prevents us from pursuing our digital agenda, from being able to come up with these innovative ideas and execute them, things that will make people's lives better, will lead to new companies forming, that cybersecurity restrains them. So I say this because we really need to think about cybersecurity, yes, as protecting things, keeping things from being lost or having financial impact. But we also need to think about cybersecurity as unleashing digital potential. There's this saying that people in cybersecurity use. Why do cars have brakes? To go faster. Why do you have cybersecurity? To unleash digital potential. Maybe you can quibble with the analogy, but the idea is that you need to have this in place in order to avoid being attacked, in order to have these systems torn down so that you lose hundreds of millions of dollars and ultimately people abandon these projects. So let's turn it back to you. I've been talking in very broad, maybe definitional terms here about some of the cybersecurity theory and how we think in this world, giving you really just a flavor of this. But not everybody is going to be a cybersecurity professional in the sense that they're going to be monitoring for threats or responding to threats. But everybody has a role to play in cybersecurity. So what I'd like to talk about now is things you can do on a daily basis to stay safe, to keep your assets safe, and to protect your organization's assets as well. How can you become that stronger link in the cybersecurity chain? And how can you be that human firewall? Generally, on an individual basis, there are 4 things you can do. Secure your accounts. Click with caution. I use that to say, be wary of spam. Keep your software up to date and protect your privacy. Privacy and security are sometimes addressed separately, but they're really interrelated. That loss of privacy can also lead to a loss of cybersecurity and vice versa. So let's talk for a moment about securing your accounts. I tell everybody in my family to do this, but I think still they don't. When I say to my dad, hey, you just signed up for this service online. Maybe instead of me buying it myself, you could give me access to this service. And he says, sure, here's my password. I'm like, that's the same password you use for everything, Dad. I've told you a million times, it needs to be like this. But people are people. So your password should be long, at least 16 characters. They should be random, and they should be different for every account. So it should be like the example I show here on the slide, some series of characters that don't mean anything. Great. How am I going to remember a long, seemingly random password for every website out there? This is where password managers come into play. Everybody should be using a password manager. There are better ones out there. I happen to use 1Password. I've used Dashlane in the past, LastPass. The important thing is that password managers allow you to, when you set up your account at a website, will automatically generate a password for you, and you can make it as long as you want, and will capture the user account and the password you created for that account. And then it embeds inside your browser or on your phone so that anytime you visit that website, it will automatically come up and say, oh, you're visiting google.com. Should I autofill your google.com account name and password? And before doing that, it'll do the biometric check or whatever on your phone or your PC. And then once you clear that, it fills in that unique password. So I don't know what my passwords are for all of my accounts out there. Now, the good news is we're actually starting to move beyond passwords to what we call a passwordless world. And in that passwordless world, we're going to cut this step out because passwords don't work for the reasons I described. No matter how much I tell my dad, use long, complex passwords, no matter the fact that he has 1Password installed, he just doesn't end up doing it. So it's not fair to users. So passwordless means that you'll go to a website, you'll put in your username or whatever identifies you, and then it will challenge you with some sort of biometric authentication. And then that's it. You're in. You scan your fingerprint. There's no password to remember. There's no password stored on the server somewhere that could potentially get hacked. It's easy, and it's oftentimes easy things are more secure things. Wherever it's available, multi-factor authentication